Hey, what is up, guys? We are going to be talking about what is the future of Branded on Master Duel. So, with the release of the fiendsmith support in the new Duelist pack, we now have a meta that's effectively a tier 0 metagame, with fiendsmith, Snake Eye, Azamina being far and beyond the best deck above everything else. I'm a branded player, and even I have to admit that the best deck in the format is currently Snake Eye. Now, I famously made a video right before the Duels pack got announced that Branded was the best deck in Master Duel, and I think that was basically the case. I think Branded, like Ryan Yu said recently in Steven Santoli's podcast, that Branded is perennially a top 5 deck in Master Duel, I think, and I think that still applies to this current format. I think Branded is overall the probably best non-Fiendsmith deck in the whole game at the moment. I would say it's better than also some of the Fiendsmith variants. I think it has a better going second than decks like YuGiOh. So I wanted to talk about, Branded's place in the meta. I'm going to talk about its like matchups into the top decks right now, and just kind of show how like Branded is basically still an incredible pick right now, and what we can be running to have a better matchup into the Fiendsmith deck. On top of things like Retaliating Sea kind of creeping into the meta and how we can kind of play around that, there's going to be gameplay interspersed between me just looking at the deck profile and then my face. So if you like this kind of video, just yapping about Branded except Master Duel, please leave a like down below and let me know what your favorite card that we talked about this video was down below. Subscribe, we're on the road to 10,000 subscribers. We're less than 500 away. So I'd really appreciate if you would at least do that. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Here, we're going to talk about my current list and then why I think Branded is as good as it is right now, and then we'll talk about all the matchups, and then we'll talk about techs that we can be running too. So this is the list that I used to get to like Master 3 so far on Master Duel. I'm going for Master 1, and I've teched out this list a bit, and we did a ton of the grinding on stream, 99% of it. So I'd check it out. Also, some of the gameplay from the grind will be in this video. So we ended up opting for the 60 card build at the end of the day, because in the current format with the tier 0 Snake Eye Fiendsmith, you have to prepare for those really big boards. On top of just like White Forest Azamina and now YuGiOh Fiendsmith and like Tearlaman's Fiendsmith being in the meta, you have to be able to break these really good boards. Appaloosa is still in the game. Baron de Fleur is still in the game, and this is what Fiendsmith, Snake Eye is going to be really doing, that's really establishing a huge Appaloosa on top of Baron, on top of the Fiendsmith engine, which is going to get really overwhelming for any sort of like low to the ground build. And I think so that's why, 40 card Branded doesn't quite work in this current format. You can run things like Synchro Branded, and we'll touch on that a little later, which is usually a little bit more low to the ground, but even then I'd run it as 60 card. So that's why we're at 60 card now, because we can run bangers like The Grass Looks Greener. And what I mean by a banger is that this is like a one card that just throws a bomb at your opponent. This is going to be a card that your opponent needs to deal with. And running the 60 card variant allows you to run enough, all the bangers you could ever want in Branded. Like Ryan Yu said in the same podcast, or I think it was Ryan, I think Enzo, Branded gets to run every good card in the game. We get to run Grass, we get to run Goldstark, we get to run Allure of Darkness, we get to run Thrust, we get to run like Nadir Servant, we get to run, Maxx if we want, like Molcharmy Fuwalos. Branded Fusion is just like one of the most broken cards ever, and that's what our deck kind of revolves around. But we also have lots of an engine breaking in Fallen of Albaz. However, with the Fiendsmith boards, we are looking to change the build a little bit, because we have to you have to draw like basically 2 board breakers to break the Fiendsmith Snake Eye board. If you draw Maxx, it gets a little different, obviously, because then you start kneecapping their board, and then you could also run things like Molcharmy Fuwalos, which I was running at various points in this build for what it's worth. I have opted to take it out though in favor of running 3 Dark Ruler no more, so that's kind of like preference based. I do think Dark Ruler is going to serve me better because having this on top deck or just opening it allows me to at least have a chance into the Snake Eye board. You can use Dark Ruler and then you can automatically negate the Baron and the Apo. If they have the Snake Eye trap, then you're kind of looking like you're cooked, but obviously that's why having double board breaker is really good, like the Book of Eclipse too, and that's why we're running things like Allure of Darkness, so we can actually draw into those things. We're running the double Mercurier so that we can hopefully draw into the Banish, and then also just having a really good grind game is really important when you're running Grass Looks Greener. You're really trying to resolve this card, even going second off of Thrust. That's why we're still running Thrust. I've talked to Nightfall, shout out to Nightfall TCG. He's currently not running Thrust in his branded deck, and I currently think that Thrust through my testing is still incredible overall. Like, obviously I don't think that's what he's saying, but I think it's kind of bad in like a best of, it can be not optimal in the best of one format, but this is still going to be one of your best options to play through things like Maxx or Droll or Mulcharmy, because you can set the fusion duplication off of it. And also, like I said, it's just another copy of Grass Looks Greener going second, which is just like, if this card resolves, you basically win the game. Also, Triple Tactics Talents is, I think, really important right now to have in your deck, because you can take the Apo and then use the Apo to negate your opponent's hand trap. So I think, like, if I wouldn't not be running away to Talents or multiple Talents in my branded deck at the moment, because this card's just so broken against like into an Apo or like, and then like Book of Eclipse is like also arguably our best board breaker right now, because obviously we can dodge like Imperm and Valor. There's so many of those in the format, and even Ghost Mourner being better on the Master Duel format because of OCG rulings. So I think Book of Eclipse is just an incredible card right now, because you can use it to break into like a Baron or a Fiendsmith board. It's not great into Apo, obviously, but it's good going first, so it's good enough going second that I think it warrants the main deck, even though, because if this card's like a Forbidden Droplet and I get Impermed, I'm just dead, and it wouldn't happen that way if it was Book of Eclipse. This card can also get Ash, which is slightly annoying, but like, I'm not going to run Book of Moon over it, We're not into Ryzeal format. Once we get to Ryzeal format, maybe we can consider Book of Moon, but at the moment, I think that's just fine as it is. But like I said, just kind of debating, going between the Charmies and the Dark Rulers in this build. Also, the Allure of Darkness is something I have recently added back in. This could also be the Mulcharmies, frankly, but I think Allure of Darkness might be pretty good overall when I'm running 3 Dark Ruler no more, so I can just like draw into double board breaker or like Grass plus board breaker, because there's a lot of permutations where like one board breaker plus like 1 or 2 card starters or like bangers kind of like actually will break the Fiendsmith board. So like, for instance, like Grass Looks Greener plus Dark Ruler basically will do that, right? Or Book of Eclipse plus like Talents is really good too. And then just like any way to make Talents live essentially is just like really good, essentially, with Talents or Thrust. Also, Albaz is arguably a board breaker when Centurion is still one of the better, like, non-Fiendsmith decks, so you can run things like Alba Lenatus, and then obviously there's still Tenpai Dragon, so you're just getting a lot of free games into those decks. And I think your worst matchup is like White Forest, because if you go against White Forest going second and you don't draw Maxx, you basically lose, because they make effectively an FTK board when they can because they can actually like negate your Dark Ruler no more, which is the issue. Like, so you really do need to draw like 3 board breakers. I mean, 2 to 3, it depends if they mess up their combo. Like I said, if I have Maxx or not. And also, let me just mention, I have been like debating on like running Ash. Like, basically those are kind of like Ash, Mulcharmy have been the things I've been like teching in and out between the Allures and Dark Rulers. I'm currently not on Ash because it's arguable when we're running like 60 card. It's a good top deck, and it's a good opening because of Maxx, so it's something you can consider, but one Ash is never stopping like Fiendsmith, so that's why I'm also not running this. I'd rather just see like these board breakers that are bangers, or just like Allure Darkness into draw 2 into banish. And then also I have debated on running Pot of Desires, but I think it kind of conflicts a little bit too much with like things like Nadir, and then also especially Grass Looks Greener. So it's something to consider, though, just to smooth out your 60 card. Also, Pot of Prosperity for that reason also could possibly be used, honestly, but that's something that we can consider when we get to the text. Also, the DD Vice King Requiem is something I've heard a lot of people say, like, should we run this, should we not in Master Duel. I've even heard people say, like, you know bad people, like, you're a bad player if you run the lock, which I entirely disagree with, like, vehemently. I think that's like a really bad mindset to have with Yu-Gi-Oh, and shows like weakness in your deck building ability, because of the fact that you have to be able to consider every option in your shed, in your tool shed, essentially, in Yu-Gi-Oh. If you're blocking yourself from being able to use something because you're putting a characteristic under a card, for a card that you're saying this thing is toxic, which has nothing to do with how good or bad the card is. If it's good, then you should run it. And I think this is not a card that I'm ever like forcing unless I'm really ahead. I'm running Nadir, so like you do really cap out the ceiling a lot of the time, especially if you have like grass, thrust, Nadir. These things like really increase your ceiling with the deck. So a lot of the time you just need something else to do than Lad and looping Mirror Jade. So like the lock is really good, but I think it's like way better for things like Maxx C. You need a line for Maxx C that you don't just like give your opponent 3 draws. So I think like having the DD Vice King Requiem is almost needed for that reason. Yes, there is Engraver. Yes, there is Deception. I'm actually debating on running Ra's Disciple, honestly, because um I think Roz could potentially actually be a little bit better than DD Vice King, because you can't send this off a Grand Guignol, but you could also still like get it elsewhere, and it can't be outed by things like Deception. It can't be outed by Engraver. So for right now, I'm actually going to test out the Razi Disciple. I think that sounds like a way better. And this gives us still a clean Mulcharmy line. We make Sanctifier, and then we can make a way to attempt to get to Ra's Disciple. Obviously, we could send the Ra's Disciple off of the Branded Fusion as well. That's the thing, though. You just can't send it off of the Grand Guignol, so that's why I still like the Vice King. So it's like really player preference. I do think that in the current format, Ra's Disciple's arguably better, but like I said, this is way cleaner, and then also this could be just really outed. It can't be dropleted, which still a lot of people are on Master Duel, so that's something to consider too. I think you kind of do need this for those moments, and then also when you go second and they have so much follow-up that you can't really establish a whole lot, this card's not terrible in that situation. I think you should be able to a lot of the time still break their board and put them on a state where like Lad plus Mirror Jade is usually enough, but if you can't, this is still there. It is a terrible brick in your hand, and I can understand people who don't main this card, but I've had way too many games on stream where I just get like Maxx C, Mulcharmied, and I'm just like, damn, I really wish I had Vice King right now. So there's like benefits to not running the brick, but I think overall it's like worth it. And then things like Called by the Grave, I think, are like the best card in the game. I think this card should be banned, honestly. And like TCG, this card's crazy at 1. At 2, it's like everyone gets to run it, and it's just crazy when your opponent sees it. It sucks when your opponent sees it for your own deck. So that's why I've been kind of, honestly, on Master Duel, been much more about like looping Mirror Jade and like not playing into Called by as much as you can, depending on how many cards in your opponent hand there are. Like, I think it's like Master Duel brand is super fun because it's super technical. It's just like you have to play around so much non-engine, so there's a lot of thinking involved, and actually it does like really come into like sometimes I rage on stream, but honestly there's still a lot of skill in Master Duel. And like I was mentioning before, for the grind game, we are running the 2 Quem, and then like the branded in white and 2 red. I think the 2 red, because sometimes just like milling the red off of the Grasslook screener really sucks, or like the banishment, so we just have more targets. Also, you need to run branded in white with Grasslook screener. It just like makes your grass like infinitely better, because you can go Branded Fusion, then search out a white, and you already have a filled graveyard because of Grasslook screener for the white. So you get to like basically Sanctifier lock plus Lad plus Mirror Jade, a lot of those lines, which is just like crazy. We are running 1 High Spirits because we're running the Allures, so we could potentially take out the 3 Allures, 1 Mercurier, and then run 3 High Spirits too. I just think at 60 card you kind of need like draw 2. That's why we're running the Allure, and there's like not 3 Desires. We don't have 3 Branded Fusion. We do have the Nadir, but I don't run the Garura in this build at the moment. We could run the Garura, but the thing is that we don't have the Latent Darkness, or we don't have the Super Poly. So I think at the end of the day, we can just like use the Maximus and the Nadir in the grind game. If we are playing through the hand traps, we can just send like a Chaos Star Source or like a Masquerade, something that we aren't using, and then banish off for the Maximus and then still be able to play the game. At the end of the day, all you need to be able to do is send the Albion and the Titan Clad, and you're still making a pretty, like, you're still making Mirror Jade with that. Also, Triple Sireneer, so love having it back. Definitely been running it. It's great in the Fiendsmith meta. You're able to hit the Engraver. You're able to, it's incredible for that reason. Hit the Lurie in certain situations. And speaking of that, you always just Mirror Jade the shit out of the Lurie. This format's great for Branded because like Mirror Jade just like crushes the Fiendsmith board also. And then Lad also, because like they have to like search, they have to go Engraver, and like they're already like 3 cards down already without even a body to attack over the Lad. They don't usually have a big body enough to attack over the Lad, which is super good, especially the Snake Eye variant, unless they open Diabellstar. So that's just something to consider. And then Masquerade too, speaking of that, I think Masquerade might be even better. Like, you could potentially not run the lock and then just run Masquerade and then maybe cut the Sanctifier. But I still like Sanctifier even if you don't run the lock for the Mulch Army line, because you could still make like Mirror Jade on your opponent's turn under 1 draw, which is nice. And then also the Masquerade is something where you could, like, if they have so much advantage, but you put them on like 3,000 life or something, you can make the Masquerade. I think this is probably better than the lock in that occasion, because then they have to interact with the Masquerade, and you could like use your interactions that you've established to basically neg out the Masquerade. Also, this does not start a chain, so you could use this under Light and Darkness Dragon Lord. So if you just like established Lad plus Masquerade, that's just crazy. I think Quertus, once again, you just have to be running this card too. And then quickly, we're going to, this is my Master Duel branded tech list. So we have a bunch of techs that we could be running right now. Like, should we be running Maxx C? I think so. I think Maxx C is the best card in the game for sure. Ashe, not so much, but like, it's still great going first, going second in top deck. So I think it's like fine if you run it. Ghost Bell, probably not. It's good into the Bestials, but it's just like not really what you want to see. Keeper is an okay one of that I've debated on running in more of a high spirits build. It's fine. And then Ecclesia with Uka is something that I've also had a lot of people ask me about in Master Duel. This is something that you can definitely run, especially in the higher ranks. I think this is very good in the higher ranks because you're only going to be going against Fiendsmith variants. So Uka is just like free real estate essentially, because you could summon out the Ecclesia, and then Ecclesia can summon out the Fallen of Albaz, and then Fallen of Albaz can fuse off and make the Albion, and then Albion can make the Mirror Jade, and then you're removing 2 bodies off your opponent's side of the field with the Fiendsmith engine while establishing grind game, because Mirror Jade sends the Albion. So it's kind of crazy because Makuka, but it's only good against the Fiendsmith variant. So you want to use them like high rated if anything. If not, it's kind of fine. And then also you have things like Retaliating C, which you have things like Retaliating C being in the game now too, because it's so good against the Fiendsmith Snake Eye deck. So we can actually play around this though quite easily, because we have things like Lubellion, and then we have Lad Line, so this is not really that hard. Also, we can just get rid of it with things like Borreload and like, so this card's never been an issue. You just need to know how to play around it in the high rated ranks. Also, Golden Sword Soul I've been asked about. I don't really love this card. It's like, it's a fine extender, but you're already running so many bricks. Like you guys saw, I'm running 2 red, 1 white, and a banishment. Those are all bricks on their own, so I'm not trying to extenuate that. The Bestials are good right now. I'm not sure if I'd be running Jerusalem Baldrake. They're fine, but they aren't going to be like the one-stop shops against the Fiendsmith deck unless you're running 10 of them, and maybe that lends credence to the Synchro variant, which I was going to talk about. I think Synchro is quite good right now because of the Bestials. You get to run a bunch of Bestials, which are great against Fiendsmith. So we're going to probably try that out on stream one of these days. I don't think it's better than Pure still, but still something to consider as a fun variant. And then also the Bestial Luber is also arguably kind of good because of the Tenpai deck also still being around. So also, I had a few questions about the Azamina package and Branded for Master Duel. I think it's not that good, honestly, because there's only 1 wanted. So you have to run the Mu Reseal Lago to search the wanted, and it kind of gets a bit complicated. It's a lot better when wanted's at 3 in that kind of deck, honestly, because you don't need the Omni Negate, and you are getting the draw power out of the wanted a lot of the time. So I think it's not as good, and I would rather just open the wanted than opening like 3 deception. It's okay. I just don't like when I have to run the Mu. So yeah, we would just, I'm personally staying away from Azamina Branded on Master Duel. I also think Super Poly's fine because of Baron Apo, but it's like one of those things I don't want to commit a ton of extra deck space because then I have to get the Garura, Mud Dragon, and etc. Verte's also very good right now. Fine room for Verte. Mulch Army is very good right now in Branded, which is crazy. You get to run Mulch Armies at 60, right? And the Fuwalos is a high spirits bridge, so consider that. I've also seen some people pick up Brightest Blazing Branded King in the main deck in Master Duel. I can see why, because of all the board breakers. Like, it's still just being there, like whether it's talents or like called by rather. This card just like takes care of called by, so I can understand running it. Also, it's like decent recurrence, so it's a good card. Droplet's something that we could run. Also, I just don't love going neg, so that's why I think Dark Ruler is better than Droplet right now. Nadir is also very good just to play through all the hand traps. You get Maxx, you get Drolled. Well, not the Droll, but well, if you have something in graveyard, yes, you can play around the Droll for sure, because it can revive from or take from graveyard. Remember that with Nadir, you can play around Droll if you have something in the graveyard. But yes, you can also play around things like Nib, and then also Maxi Molcharmy, very good for that reason. Also, Dragoon is arguably kind of interesting in this kind of format. I don't think it's good because Apo kind of makes it so this card's so hard to make going second. So I just like, I don't, I, this is a card that might have a different format kind of thing. And Chaos Star Source, run this card. This card's broken. This card's broken, especially whenever Blue Eyes comes out. Super Poly will definitely be back in our main deck, so we can Super Poly just all the Blue Eyes boards and make Chaos Star Source. So yeah, guys, what did you guys think of this video? What was your favorite card I went over? What do you guys think about Master Duel Branded? I think it's in a great position right now. Like, let me just talk about the decks quickly. I kind of forgot to do that. Like, if we're talking about the best deck, obviously Snake Eye Fiendsmith. I think you have a bad time going second unless you draw a double board breaker or Maxx C, but that's why we're running ways to do that. Tenpai Dragon, great. You have a great matchup, especially when they're so hit right now with the field spell at 1, Kaiman at 2. I think the deck is actually quite weak to you, especially when you're running Albalanedos. It's just as long as you are running things like Borreload or Chaos Star Source, you'll be fine. White Forest Azamina, it's a pretty bad matchup if you lose die roll, but if you win die roll, obviously you just like win the game every single time. But that's kind of how it is in the reverse to you. If they run Bestials, it can be a little annoying, but obviously that turns on your thrust, so just have like, Maxx C. Double board breaker helps you in this situation, but that's definitely a tough matchup. Snake Eye Fire King, I think it's just straight up you have a better deck than Snake Eye Fire King. Same with Yubel. I mean, maybe it's just Snake Eye Fire King super clunky and like bricky. That's why I think like TCG Fire King is actually almost like a better option. Yubel Fiendsmith, it sucks to go second against this kind of deck, I'm not gonna lie, but I think this is also something where like Maxx C slams the stack or Fuwalos, so definitely good. Same with Tier Elements. So that's why I'm just like saying either you're running a bunch of board breakers or you're running like the Maxx C Fuwalos package to hopefully draw against those decks and you'll just be fine. However, I think that Yubel Fiendsmith Tier Elements have terrible going second. I think White Forest Azamina have terrible going second. I think Snake Eye Fire King, Tenpai, and Fiendsmith are the only decks with better going second than like Branded, arguably. I think Branded arguably has a better going second than Snake Eye Fire King, but it's still pretty good on Snake Eye Fire King, to be fair. So, for that reason, I'd like rank Branded to probably be around third to fourth best deck. I think Tenpai could also be second best deck ahead of Tenpai, frankly. Magical Musket's like fine. Like Fiendsmith is kind of a joke. I don't know why Branded is this low. I think Branded is definitely better than a lot of these decks. It's just that Branded can go first and going second, but I think it's not the best going second right now into the Fiendsmith stuff. So that is the issue there, but that's why you just have to main deck stuff, and obviously, it's just like the double board breaker gets you going first against Tenpai, setting up, sequencing, definitely important. So yeah, guys, we will be talking to you later. METAGAMESGX signing out. Bye-bye.